Hello YouTube, this is Matt Pullen, the guy who makes those chess videos. I had a request in my inbox for a Queen versus Knight checkmate video, and I think I could do that. But first I'm going to illustrate some geometric concepts of the relationship between royalty and knights. And this, I think, would help in any endgame you're in, which involves a knight. So in this illustration, the black knight is checking the white king. Now, where does the white king want to be in relationship with the knight? Let's look at all the possibilities. If the king moves 2 squares orthogonally from the knight, then the knight can check in one move, by going to d7 or d3 for check. If the king moves right next to the knight, then, because the king and knight are on different colors, the knight cannot check in one move. However, the knight, say, can move here, and in an additional one move can check the white king. If the king moves diagonally to attack the knight, then the knight can check the king on either one of these squares right away. So if the white king wants to position himself against the knight in a way to avoid checks, then the best squares to go to are either 3 squares orthogonally from the knight or 2 squares diagonally from the knight, depending on what the situation on the board is like. If the king moves 3 squares orthogonally from the knight, then the king is taking away these 2 squares that the knight could move forward to. So the knight the fastest way to check would be to play backward before the knight moves forward, in order to go to d4 and check the white king here. Of course, this involves the knight moving backward, so probably not the best use of time, especially if the king can be doing something somewhere else on the board. Also, a good defensive try is to play the king to 2 squares diagonally from the knight, and this takes away these 2 squares that the knight has to move forward. And if the knight moves to say e6, well, now we're 3 squares orthogonally, and this is something that we've already seen, where the knight is going to have to take an additional 2 moves to check the white king. So yeah, if the king moves here, now you're controlling these squares, and if the knight tries to go here, then those squares are controlled. So keeping this relationship of the royalty 2 squares diagonally from the knight is it's key. It's the best technique to use to gain a position over the knight. And here it's the same thing applies with the queen against the knight. If the queen, obviously on a wide open board, has a great advantage over the knight, but the best way is to play the queen to 3 orthogonal squares away from the knight, so that you're taking away half of the knight's squares, and in addition attacking the knight. Notice that a bishop on the square the queen is on would have this same effect. Also, if the queen moves diagonally 2 squares from the knight, again, we're taking away half of the knight's squares, but a different half. Because the board is so wide open and the knight is not attacked or the knight is not protected by anything, the best place for the queen would actually be right next to the knight, because we're attacking the knight and hitting all these squares. But as we'll see in a endgame where you're fighting against a king and knight, the king is often very close to the knight protecting it. So any attempts of the queen to take the knight would be nullified. You would need the king also to assist. So let's see how that geometry works out in actual play. And my queen is attacked, so I will respond by playing queen to e5 to limit his knight. I'm moving 2 squares away from the knight vertically, so any knight square is attacked by the queen. Fortunately for him, he can go knight to c7 because his king protects that. And now I will play queen to d6 check, forcing him to keep defending the knight. And now I will play queen to c6, again attacking all the light squares that the knight could move to. So he keeps on moving into the corner, which is good for me, so now I'll approach with my king. And he probably has to repeat position here with king to c6, king to c8. So now I'm going to approach with my king. Again, he has 2 knight checks, but they're both covered by my queen. Okay, so here I want to approach with my king, and I want to do it on a square that's 2 squares diagonally away from his knight, because that's the best shape to take. Alright, so now my king is covering the d6 and f6 squares. So I think my queen doesn't have to stay here anymore. My queen can cut off the black king on the back rank. Alright, so he played knight to c7, and now I want to keep approaching with my king. But where do I approach with my king? The obvious move would be to king d6, and then he would have to put me in check with knight d8, and then I would go to see, where do I want to go? Probably to you know, I'm going to play here anyway. I think this is the best move. Right, and now I will play king to c6, because now his knight has no checks on my king. It's 2 squares diagonally away. And I'm threatening to checkmate on d7. So he has to lose the knight. So I will check, and then this is checkmate. Alright, so let's refresh and get another random position. Okay, this one looks a little harder. So I'm going to start out by moving my queen to e2, you know, being 3 squares orthogonally away from his knight. He can put me in check, which he probably will, but no. So now I will approach with my king, 2 squares diagonally away from the knight. Alright, so here I will check with the queen, and now he has to go to c5 to stay on the knight. And here I do not want to play king to d7, because that allows the knight fork, knight to e5 check. So rather I'll play here, pinning, forcing his king to go to one side. And now I will play this. So let's see, I will move my king. I just want to move my king in here. This looks like the best square, but then he'll just play knight to c4, and that repeats position. So I guess I'll play here now. He has a couple of checks, but I'm not afraid of checks. So now I will play king to d5, and then he'll check me on b6 probably. And I'll play king to d4. So now my king is 2 squares diagonally from his knight. So I do not want to play king c5, because that allows the fork on a4. So instead I just want to move my queen so that it is 3 squares orthogonally from the knight. And now I want to play king to c5, threatening the knight. So the knight's probably going to go to d7 for check. And I will keep attacking the knight, forcing it to move again. So now my king is in a great position to limit his knight. The king is controlling d7 and c6. So I want to limit his king with my queen as much as I can. So the obvious move, the move that jumps out at me the most, is queen to b5. I don't see anything wrong with this, so let's play it. Alright, so he played knight a6, And if I move my king to the c6 square, he is going to check me on b8 probably. And now I will go to king c7, approaching with my king, and he will check me on a6. And now I will move my king 2 squares diagonally from the knight. And now he has no useful moves. He just played knight to c5, but I can just take that and win pretty quickly. So there you have it. That is the basic technique for winning with the king and queen versus the knight. You always have to keep in mind that relationship of of royalty to the knight. Where you want to be either 3 squares orthogonally or 2 squares diagonally from that horse. Well, good luck applying this technique, and see you later.